So next, thank you again, Dr. Agarwal, appreciate it. Would like to, it's really my honor to introduce the next speaker for more than one reason. Brahmachari, Dr. Sharan, is moved to Washington, D.C. from London, England, to serve as the first full-time director of Dharmic life in the campus ministry at Georgetown University. So that itself, is a phenomenal, success, in terms of and what he has done to transform Georgetown University, where I also am the professor there. So it's just unbelievable for the students. He is the first Hindu monk to serve in a Catholic institution. He also is an adjunct professor in Georgetown's Department of Theology, Asian Studies, and Linguistics. His academic training is in Indology, Sanskrit philology, classical Indian intellectual systems, Indian religious traditions and society, and medieval Braj literature and Vedanta. He is also an instructor of Hindu priests and holds the title of Brahmachari, the master of Hindu rituals. He advises 93 Hindu temples worldwide and is consultant for the Hindu Forum of Britain and the Hindu Priest Council of UK. He has accomplished so many things in his such young life, and so he is going to be giving so much to our next generation that we are talking about. The Hindu students at Georgetown and everywhere else, they are immensely benefited by his teachings, and also he's, when he's in the semester, he also holds weekly aartis for the students. So it is not just only the theory part, but combines the practical part as well as in terms of the various aspects of Sanatana Dharma. So it is indeed my pleasure to invite Dr. Sharan to give the next speech. Thank you.
Om Niyamedanando Jagat Asete Khiram Tamaham Niyamanandam Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum Sudarshana Mahabao Koti Surya Samaprabha Ajnanandhasya Medeva Vishnum Margam Pradarshaya Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Boliye Shri Satya Sanatan Dharma Ki Jai. With thanks to Suresh Chandraji, Dr. Subramanian ji, Sankupta ji, and everybody who has joined us today. The topic for my 20 minutes, and I'm watching that clock. It's 2:05 as I see it there, so I have a 2:25 on that clock. I actually prepared something in complete ignorance of the time limit that we had. So I'm going to condense it as much as possible. The topic is something that we could talk on for the entire saptaha. You could have an entire saptaha just on this topic of Hinduism in the 21st century, and specifically its relevance to spiritual growth, world peace, spiritual growth and world peace. I wanted to present on a topic that seems quite innocuous, something that's quite simple. It said very simply, from theory to practice, Hindu Dharma for personal growth in the 21st century. I'll start by doing what normal Indian people do, which is to completely ignore what I said I was going to do. I'm going to do something completely different, because when I was looking at the plethora of practices one could talk about, from which one could derive their own growth, the variety is both exciting on the one hand and bewildering on the other. If I wanted to learn about, say, the means of the ability to acquire the expertise to excise a tumor from the brain, I would surely be able to find 20 or more years worth of literature on the internet that I could read for every single hour and still not come to the end of it. And there are videos on YouTube, would you believe, that are published by surgeons that you could use. And you could learn, therefore, how to perform surgery. But I don't think anyone in their right mind would ever pick up a scalpel. Number one, until they had a license. And number two, until and unless somebody had guided them through the process beforehand. So, in thinking about the theory and the practice of that from our Dharma, which will give us benefit, I'm going to focus on one thing. Ours is a tradition which is not characterized by rote belief. But our tradition is characterized by serious scientific inquiry. Indeed, if you look on any encyclopedia about what is called the scientific method, the ability to think of a hypothesis, to design an experiment to test that hypothesis, to evaluate the results, and then to make sure that that methodology can produce the same results again. That specific scientific method, if you look it up in any encyclopedia, you'll find that the ancient civilizations of India and China both developed versions of the scientific method. This, I think, is astounding. And you know, nowadays, especially with what our sons tell us, what our Swamijis tell us, that Hinduism is a scientific religion, you know, we're happy, we start looking through everything, and we find, ooh, there is an aeroplane, ooh, there is a nuclear reactor, and we get bogged down by things that are very, very difficult to prove. Some things that are there in our Dharma are so well encoded, it takes very subtle minds to be able to bring out their truths. For example, the discipline of psychoanalysis, psychology, and psychiatry. Do we know Carl Jung? Have we heard the name Carl Jung? Okay. Do we know who he was in contact with? Do you know what he was reading? The father of psychology was reading the Tao literature, Confucian literature, but also Upanishadic literature. He was corresponding with Swami Vivekananda. He was opened to mental theory that was not available to him in the scientific disciplines that he grew up with. I hope I'm making myself clear. So there is a lot more that we can celebrate, especially if you look at theoretical physics, astronomical physics, and our Vedanta, than simply say, oh, we could fly. How are you going to prove that to somebody in the 21st century? Stick with what we can prove, and our young generation will find much more harmony with our Dharma. I think so. For example, when I ask the students, going completely off piste here, when I ask the students, tell me of a big blockbuster movie that dealt with Hinduism, the first thing that they will say is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Kali Ma, Shakti De, and all this nonsense. Right? That's the one they will tell me. When I ask them about the Matrix, right, nobody will give me the answer that it was based on Upanishadic ideals. And they say, well, you're just making things up. Well, the Wachowski brothers, who are now the Wachowski sisters, had read Upanishads, and more importantly, they were intrigued by the concept of Maya. So much so that if you look at the third Matrix, and you listen to the credits, it is a very anglicized pronunciation, but they are singing in an operatic style, Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritam gamaya, that famous Upanishadic mantra that we all know. Why then are they so happy to say that Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom dealt with Hinduism? Why not Matrix? Why not George Lucas and his friend who was part of the Vedanta Society and the Force from Star Wars? It's because of a thing that I'm going to highlight in my paper, which is very, very simple. The more stupid you can make people's practices and beliefs appear, the more you can dominate them. And the more you can benefit from their extrapolated theories that are devoid of its cultural context in your own life if you say that it's your idea. How is this going to help us personally? I will show you because there is a thing. Anywho, coming back to these practices, you know how we are supposed to figure out the practice? I'm not supposed to tell you the practice that will give you spiritual betterment from a microphone. The word that we look at is Upanishad. What does Upanishad mean? Upa plus ni, those are two prefixes, plus the verbal root, shad. What does shad mean? means sit. What does upa mean? It's close. What does ni mean? In proximity or down together. So knowledge of the essence, knowledge of what will help you in your lives will only be gotten if you sit with somebody who knows it. You might think that this prescription is a bit alien in the 21st century. I want to give you a couple of things just to show you that. Let me see if this works. Just to show you that this is the case in our scriptures. The Mundak Upanishad, everybody knows this, that Vijnanartham Sadguru Meva Vigachet Savitvarni Shrotriyam Brahmanishtham. Everybody knows this. It means for knowledge of that, tad. What tad? Om Tat Sat, that tat. Knowledge of whatever that is will be gotten if you approach with humility, or in this case Samhitvarni, if you take Samhitas. But if you approach a knowledgeable person, who is that knowledgeable person? He is both Shrotriyam and also not only he, she too. They are Shrotriyam and they are Brahmanishta. They are Shrotriya, well read, but also Brahmanishta, who are completely absorbed. Nishtha doesn't only mean faith, it also means absorption, right? Who is totally absorbed in contemplating, meditating on Brahman. That's great. I've given you another couple examples. Bhagavad Gita is there, Tadvidhi Prayipatena, Prayakrashina Sevaya Upadekshanti Te Jnanam Jnanastatva Darshina, that's from 434. We know this. It says, in order to learn what Tad is, go through serving, through humility to somebody who knows. And that jnani, that knowledgeable person, that tattvadarshi, the person who sees the truth, will be able to tell you anything you ask. So why is it the case? Oh wait, just to make sure that we know that, this is not just some advice that we can choose to follow. Those who we think of as siddha in our tradition, for example, Ramanuja, he opens his Gita Bhashya first and foremost with pranamas to his guru, to Yamunacharya, Sri Yamunacharya. And just because I also want to make sure that we honor our women teachers and women saints, Bastva Molak Dhi Bhare Sadguru, Kiripa Kari Apanayo Payoji Mheto Ram Ratan Dhan Payo. This is the Marwadi original. Payoji Mene Ram Ratan Dhan Payo, that's obviously a lot later. But Marwadi was her language, this was the original. So everybody is in agreement that we need an expert. But what's happened to our experts today? I love Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya is great. Jatilo Mundi, Lunchita Kesha, Kashayambara, Bahukruta Vesha, Pashyannapi Chana Pashyati Mudha, Udara Nimittam, Bahukruta Vesha, Bhaj Govindam, Govindam, Bhaj Mudha Mate. Lovely, lovely verse that says, Jatila. There will be people who have lots of long beard and hair and this Jatilu. Mundi, there will be people like me who shave off their head. Lunchita Kesha, there will be people who pull out their hair. That is referring to a very specific practice of some of the some other dharmas. Kashai Ambara, many people will pick up a saffron robe, Bahukruta Vesha, and wear it. Pashyannapi, they claim to see the truth. Charna Pashyati Mudha. Mudha is a word that is translated nicely as fool. It actually has the force of the word idiot. But those idiots cannot see the truth. Udara Nimittam, Bahukruta Vesha, all these kinds of outward appearances are simply for the sake of filling their belly. So we have a dilemma. We have the dilemma that we want to know what is best for us, but we also have a problem of not being able to approach anyone who is a real Shrotriya, Brahmanishtha, Tattvavid, Acharya or Guru. Isn't that a sad case? Isn't it disheartening when you pick up BBC News or CNN News and this news and that news, and we have Guru so-and-so, Godman so and this, God lady this one, all finding themselves in the jail. Who 21st century person would want to give our lives and say, we will serve this Guru? I wouldn't want to serve such a Guru. I hope you wouldn't want to serve such a Guru. Then we fall into a little trap. We fall into a trap where anybody who wears these veshas, any of the, where this, and nowadays also people who discard this vesha and say that I know, right? There are two types, and both of them are there at this moment in time in numbers that are, and most importantly, resourced to the hilt, right? They have resources that make this entire operation of our dharma, which says there are no resources to be involved. It makes this operation very difficult. And moving on past the slide that I said I would look at, just for the sake of time, which defines what type of Hindu we're looking for when we're looking for a Hindu guru. And I'm going to come to something that's very, very, very essential in understanding what is happening. When we say we want to know how to do a practice or we want to learn something, we already talked about the gurus. Okay, so we know that gurus are now, we can't deal with them. If we go to Panditji, Panditji is only going to be able to tell us what is our dharma, what is our duty, our religious duty. What is our duty to our temples, what our duty to our religious services, what our duties to our liturgical practice. That's great. But gurus were supposed to be something else, something more. They should know what the Pandits know and something else. In their place, we have to ask our parents, our grandparents, what does Dadiji say we should do, what does Naniji say we should do, what does Dadaji do, and what does Nanaji do. That's how we've learned, if we are really honest with ourselves, plus Mahabharata on TV, that's how we have really learned what it is to be religious, what it is to be Hindu. I want to point out the fact that it's actually a lot more dark and a lot more direct and a lot more intentional why us Hindus don't know what we're supposed to believe, practice, and know. Have you heard of a guy named Clive Wood? Clive Wood? Lord Dalhousie? We've heard about Lord Dalhousie. Do we know the Clive Wood's letters? Charles Wood is another name for him? No? Okay. Aside from the fact that 600 years of our country's history was dominated by people who would see our educational institutions, our religious institutions, and more importantly, the people who remembered, you know, we say that UNESCO has recognized us as an oral society. We remember our Vedas and we teach our Vedas. We remember our Veda, we teach our Veda. What happens when the teacher's head is no longer on his body? Which library with ashes, with a library that burned for 60 days, which library is somebody going to be able to go to and access that knowledge? Then you get very, very clever empire. He says, of course, we have Lord Macaulay. Well, I would suggest that in case, because of the sake of time, if you look up a paper by Vasudha Narayanan, the department chair of religion in Florida, she gave a wonderful paper about why us Hindus don't know what we're supposed to know about our traditions in comparison to a Christian or a Muslim or a Sikh or anybody else. Briefly, it is the Portuguese Empire's, the Portuguese Empire is a Catholic empire, British Empire is a Protestant empire. Charles Wood sent a letter to Lord Dalhousie in which he stated that religious topics must be banned from education, but that native language instructions should continue. Yeah? The only thing is, if you ban religion and you want to learn native language, is there any native Indian book that doesn't feature divine stories? So what are you then only going to be able to do? Learn English and then learn the grammar of that language. Lord Macaulay wanted to form a class of Indians who may be interpreters between us, British people, and the millions of whom we govern. A class of people, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, opinions, morals, and intellect. It's a very damning policy. And that is the policy that undergirds our religion. Because everybody in India, whether you are a guru or whether you are a normal person, we have all come through an educational system that is inherently biased against, but they said, okay, no religion. So these Christians and other people can also not teach their religion. Let me ask you something. In the British Empire, who were the teachers in the universities in India?
Nuns.
Nuns and priests. Only missionaries had the zeal to leave the comforts of the United Kingdom and go to India. Everybody else was happy to stay in the universities of the UK. So when we ask our lovely mothers and fathers and uncles and aunties and gurus even about the practices that we want to learn, are we ever going to be able to get anything but in the Ramayana it said to do this because Sita ji did that and Ramji did this, and in the Mahabharata it was like this, and so because Krishna was like this and Arjuna was like this, we should do that. We're never going to get the deep philosophical, ethical inquiries that our Vedantic traditions preserved. And so, in this 21st century, as I come to my last minute, I want to close with this. We will never be able to answer the question of how we better ourselves and how we better our society. If we rely on rote learning, we need to pick up our books. We need to really take some time to go beyond airplane and nuclear reactor to see actually what is there in our texts. You know, this quote from the Mahabharata is my favorite piece of the entire body of Hindu scripture. It says, I mean, you can read the Sanskrit for yourself, because of time I'll read the translation. There are, O Jajali, this is a conversation between Jajali the sage and Tuladhara the businessman. Jajali, sage, there are numerous wicked acts being carried out in the guise of religion. Idishan, Ashivan, Goran, Achar, Iha, Jajali. You practice them because they have been practiced by everyone from so-called ancient times. One should practice one's spirituality guided by reasoning, instead of blindly following the practices of other people. I am not an anti-religionist. I do not blame rituals, but the person that is truly knowledgeable about spiritual practices is extremely rare. All I will say that is in order to conclude is that in the 21st century, it is not the case that these people simply don't exist anymore. But you must be careful in who you're looking at for your knowledge sources, for your practices, because if you're not careful, you'll be swallowed by this mire of people who are able to talk well, but who want nothing more than to make sure their pockets are filled and their charitable organizations justify their existence. As Hindus of the 21st century and as Hindus who want to help your younger generations understand, we must return back to the heart of our dharma, which is its universal, equality-based philosophy that has been misused by people over many centuries. It is the time for dharma, but it is the time for the right dharma. Om Shanti.